Are you an internal compliance team or third-party auditor, and you just struggle with getting good evidence from engineers? I mean, they give you incomplete evidence, or they're asking you tons of clarifying questions, usually with a scowl and some frustration. Well, today we're going to talk about why that's not really a compliance problem. Well, it is a compliance problem because we have to collect the evidence, but it's really more of a translation and an operations challenge, not a compliance challenge. And if you can look at the problem that way, and we're going to talk about that today, about how to translate more effectively, and then also think of operations so we can meld better with engineering, and so we can all meet the goals of getting our audits done on a predictable schedule with high quality at scale. My name's Milan, and in the decades I've spent both as an engineering leader, where I was responsible for a large $5 billion development project operations, integration, and release management and compliance, to today where I actually manage with my team a large number of services at scale for compliance. This has been one of the biggest differences I've learned with how compliance teams and engineers can and should interact towards more common goals. And so let's talk about translation for a few minutes. The difference is it's almost like you're taking a Chinese manual and giving it to somebody that speaks French and then asking them for their opinion on it. I mean, most of these regulations and even the control statements are not necessarily written by engineers coming from the compliance or the regulators, right? There aren't very many that I know that work at that level. So what that means is that they can tend to get very specific with what they're asking for, but they don't fully understand that if they ask for that specific type of evidence, it really doesn't meet the intent of what they're asking for. And this is an example that actually happened to me when I was an engineering leader on this large project. Their access management control for a critical server asked for all the individual access, along with what their changes were, kind of the date and times, all the usual stuff with access management. Well, the problem was when I asked the team who owned the server to give me that list, they gave me exactly that list, right? They gave me all the individuals that accessed that server that had that level of access, which is kind of like root level access. Well, what was the problem with that? They gave me what I asked for, right? But we all know back then, and yes, I am dating myself a little bit here, test accounts were used quite broadly. So if you go run the actual full report of access, there are more than just individuals on it. There's a bunch of test accounts. And so, I knew, because I'd been doing this for a little while at that point, saying the intent of that control evidence request was for all access, but it wasn't really translated. The compliance team, they didn't really, at the time that I was working with, they didn't have this concept of knowing there are other types of accounts other than individual accounts. They didn't know to ask for them, so they didn't broaden out their requests broad enough. So what does that do at the end of the audit? It causes all the frustration I talked about in the previous videos, where now you have to go back to engineering late in the audit, and we all know with test accounts and why we're getting rid of them is because a lot of times you can't tell who's doing what or who's logged into the test account. They're not all that great, and we're working to get rid of them. But that's just an example that's really clean on how that translation really needs to work. Because there's no Star Trek universal tricorder that will just go and automatically translate it across the boundaries between compliance and engineering. And you cannot forget that a lot of engineering teams, they don't study the compliance stuff because that's not their job. And most compliance people don't know engineering because that's not really their job. So this translation is critical. And that's why you have to get a lot closer and ask a lot more questions. Now let's talk about operations, because this one's even more fun for me. So the one question I was never asked in 9 years of running a major product in compliance, from the compliance team asking me for evidence, was this one. Is that evidence hard for you to collect? How much time does it take you? I wish they would have asked me. As a matter of fact, I tried to tell them this control, you have no idea what it takes for me to go collect all these logs from different ways. Can we look at changing the control? Can we work together? I know I could probably come up with an easier, more automated way to do it if we can kind of adjust the control to help map to what we're actually doing in operations. And yes, of course, we have to take it back to the auditors to make sure it still meets the intent of what they're trying to test. But we can't be rigid with that anymore, because automation is the key to success. But if anybody ever asked me that question, there were a number of controls I probably could have made much more easy to collect, which would have reduced friction, reduced the risk to the audit, and it would have made all of our lives just much better. Because the one thing that, I always tell my team and I've told others is, if I had this crystal ball, I'd sit here, wave my hands over it and concentrate, and you know what? It would still have an out of order sign on it. As a matter of fact, one of my team members gave me that because I used to say it so much, but it's true. I mean, the compliance team cannot read engineers' minds, and engineers cannot read compliance teams' minds. So what I tell compliance teams is ask the question, because not a lot of engineers I know will actually even believe you can change the controls, especially if they've been there a long time. So this is where getting creative can really help not only the engineers save time, but also help you increase your probability of finishing the audit on time. I hope this has been helpful. If so, I'd appreciate a like, and if you subscribe and hit the bell, you'll get notified of other topics. But importantly, everybody wants to learn from everybody else. So down in the comments, if you've dealt with this in a different way or you have some insights that could help us, I'd love to hear about them. I hope this has been helpful to you, and have a great day.